Okay, we're being recorded, and it sort of helps, to turn your audio on if you want to say something. I have just to get started, I have a poll. I've never done a Zoom poll before, so I'm going to try this. It's completely anonymous, so who says what is not identified, not recorded. When I'll give us a few minutes for everybody to kind of run through it. I think there's 8 questions. Just answer them off the top of your head. Do not Google the answers. And then we'll look at the results together, and then we'll get started. Sound okay? Let's see. Can everybody see a poll? Okay. So it's sort of multiple choice, and well, multiple choice. Some of them let you make more than one answer. Some only let you choose one answer. So go. And if it doesn't distract you, you can still talk while you take the poll, I think. And guesses are fun.
Hey, Martha. Hey, Martha, what'd you get for number 2?
Ooh, cheater.
Martha has not done any research or preparation.
Not at all.
Well, this is kind of fun. So far, uh, nobody's voted.
What?
Or at least
So it looks like I'm clicking on options or clicking on some of the possibilities, and I
they're not.
don't think they're selecting.
Bummer.
I did some answers.
Are you yellow? So it must just be.
Mine are showing up.
Okay,
Seems to work.
cool.
And then I've posted in the chat box a link, a temporary link to the bibliography that I shared earlier. I'll eventually take that down, but I think the links are live in case you might want to go look at something, but not for answers. Yeah, I'm not sure how this poll thing's working. On my screen, it says nobody's done anything. So maybe we don't see.
We have to submit it
Oh,
after we
hey.
do all of them. So we have to answer all of them, and then we submit it, and then they'll show up.
Okay, there.
Yeah, I'm
That's good.
almost done.
That's good.
When we get done, does anybody want to know the right answers?
That's what we're here for, Jim.
Oh,
We expect to have them by 8.
yeah.
That's right.
Martha has a very good friend who has
Oh,
a friend who described her own mother as having strong opinions on both sides of many issues.
Yeah.
at the same time, or
Apparently, which,
that's pretty good.
which if when you're young and you're trying to negotiate something with your parents, it can be really tough to figure out what position to take.
Yes, yes.
I can relate.
Ah.
I can often argue both sides of the opinion and really mean it, not just know that for both. So yeah,
Are you a 9, Paul?
a 9.
Yes.
What's a 9?
A person who can argue both sides of the argument and really mean it.
I think I don't know what I'm doing. I think it's mostly what's going on here.
It's a reference to the Enneagram.
Yeah.
Oh, I failed that.
I think you're interested in creating good discussion is usually my experience.
Okay,
I'm a
when
9.
I listen, yeah,
I'm a
when I
9.
Yeah,
So.
really.
when I listen, both sides have really good points, and sometimes, I mean, it's just difficult. The easy stuff, I think we pretty much sorted out, but a lot of the existing problems, especially the ones that have been here for a while, people on both sides have legitimate good points, and that's what makes them difficult. That's been my observation. Being dogmatic helps. If I could just be more dogmatic, I could just come up with an answer and say, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at that.
I'm going to share the results. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Which color is the?
So I'm showing answers in, I'm not really sure what the colors mean, but I'm seeing answers
Yeah.
in red or blue. Okay.
I'm guessing that the red ones are the top answer and the blue ones are the second answer.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
This is just a quick poll of what we think we know, and we'll assume that our little group is representative of at least Hope Chapel. We could presume we were representative of
Our little
white
group,
people. We could presume we're representative of evangelicals,
or we could represent our little group.
or we're only representative of us. Okay, this first question, number one, how many foreign-born persons are there in the United States at this time? When I was Googling this, I got different answers, and apparently there's a difference between Googling immigrants, illegal aliens, foreign-born, whatever. But
mhm.
I think the general answer seems to be there's between 40 and 50 million foreign-born persons in the United States at the present time.
Is my wife one of them?
You know,
Because she's a citizen, but she's foreign born.
could very well
Where was she born?
be that
Oh yeah.
is the case. That people who are not born in the United States and are here now, regardless of their status. Okay. Question number two, how many illegal aliens reside in the United States at this time? 10.5 million. An illegal alien is a foreign-born person who's here and has not qualified for a green card. And in this instance, green card,
You say 10.5 or 1.5?
10.5, 10 million in round numbers, 10.5 million. A green card is synonymous with a legal permanent resident. So if you've been given permission by the government to stay here indefinitely, permanently, then you're an LPR or a green card person. And of all the foreign-born persons here now, approximately 10 million are
Illegal aliens.
okay. Now, I'll digress a little bit. You can be in the United States as a alien and not allowed to stay here permanently. So that would be people with a visa who enter to go to Disneyland, stay for a while,
Go to college.
maybe go to college, and go work. So, and depending on the particular visa that you were granted, you can work here or not work here. Some people have a special visa that they qualified for because they have special skills that some American company really wants, and they vouch for you, whatever. So I won't go more into that, but there's a difference between a person with a visa and a person with a green card. I guess we all kind of more or less knew that. Question number three, which of the following accounts for over 65% of the illegal aliens in the United States? And we're tied. We're 3 and 3 on this answer. The correct answer is overstaying visas. So approximately, and you have the number there. I was trying to think of a nifty way to ask the question, but in round numbers, about 35% of all people in the United States right now who are here illegally cross the border. Everybody else had a visa. They were allowed to come here, and they didn't leave when they were supposed to, or didn't extend their visa or do something about it. Interesting. Question number 4, how many aliens are registered under DACA who reside in the United States presently? Okay, we're pretty uniform here. The correct answer is approximately 700,000.
1,000.
So less than 1 million.
700.
Let me say that again. 700,000. Had zeros in the wrong place. 700,000. Now these are interesting folks because in order to be part of the DACA program, an illegal alien has to identify him or herself with the government. So what we knew earlier is there's 10.5 million people here illegally, and that's an estimate that the government has, and those people are not identified easily. I mean, I guess I could say as a broad overview, we don't know who they are. The government doesn't know who they are. 10.5 million people, and they're here. We think they're here, and we don't know who they are. But to qualify for DACA, you not only have to meet the specific requirements for the DACA program, you have to let the government know who you are. So the people who register for DACA take a certain amount of risk, if you want to say, in comparison to illegal aliens, because now we know who you are, where you live, and we can find you. Make sense? So DACA people have gone a step beyond. And we'll talk a little bit more about the DACA program before we all start sharing our views on it. Okay, question number 6. Do persons registered under DACA generally receive any federal benefits? That's kind of a half-trick question. You have a question, Bill? I saw your hand up, so okay.
Hey, Bill, I think your mic's muted.
Yeah.
You might unmute yourself? Or wait, oh, wait, I can do that.
Hi, Bill.
I was just stretching, sorry.
Good idea. Okay, so
I
let's.
couldn't see my hand because the scorecard was covering that part of the screen. I didn't realize you could see it though.
Okay, so this is, I don't think this is a full-blown trick question, but the answer to the question is no. People who are here in the DACA program are allowed to work. They can get a job, make a salary, they can get benefits from their employers, health insurance, all that kind of stuff, but they generally do not receive any federal benefits because, they just don't.
What counts as federal benefits?
Uh,
What kind of things?
Aid, Medicare, SNAP. Children don't, the SNAP, I forget what SNAP stands for, but I think it's like food for children.
Supplemental nutrition
Yeah.
and something program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They get to go to school. They get to pay tuition. They get to pay everything. So I'm sort of giving away the next question, I think. Do persons registered under DACA pay federal taxes? Hey, we're unanimous here. Yes, they pay federal taxes in the form of deductions from their paychecks. They pay sales tax, local taxes when they go buy stuff. So DACA people, again, they're allowed to have jobs, kind of like a green card, only they're not permanently authorized to stay in the United States. Any questions so far? Is this okay? Is this interesting? Is anybody getting their mind?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It is interesting.
Okay. Now we get into your opinion questions. Number 7. What are the best reasons in your mind, your personal emotional opinion? What are the best reasons for your mind for rescinding or maintaining DACA? Select all that you agree with, so you can choose more than one. So 2 of us said rescind DACA because the 2012 executive action was illegal. And in fact, technically and maybe in other ways, the 2012 executive action was not authorized by current federal law. Still not authorized by current federal law. 2 of us said rescind it because it's unfair to people who follow the rules. So there are people who go through the process of getting a visa or applying for citizenship, that sort of thing, and DACA people are not in any of those queues. So if you want to think of it, people have to get in line to apply to be permanent residents. The DACA people are not in those lines. And to put them in those lines ahead of anybody else, according to this answer, would seem just to be unfair. We're not talking about legality, morality, or something, just unfair. So two of us said that. Nobody wants to rescind it because of a concern that they will take jobs that would otherwise go to Americans. None of us said that. I don't think that's representative of the country as a whole, but it is us. And in the next part, we have someone said rescind it because educating and providing care for these people is too expensive. I would say there, on a net cost basis, it probably cost taxpayers more money than, I mean, costs something. But as we said in the other two questions, DACA people do pay payroll taxes. They do pay sales tax. So it's not clear exactly how much it's costing people out of their pockets. Does that make sense? Not clear to me. But now we get to the votes for maintaining it. 4 of us say maintain it because people should be left in their current status. That, in other words, kick this back to the U.S. Congress and don't change anything until the law is actually changed. As I mentioned earlier, under present law, DACA program people are aliens. They are, in effect, illegal aliens. We'll get into that shortly. DACA does not make anybody legal, so to speak. Is that news to anybody? Okay. The next selection was the DACA policy is humane and good, and the strict operation of the law would produce an unjust result. So now we have, not too many of us are worried about that. So, and the last one, we've got people who have reasons that are not listed here that you would either maintain it or rescind it. And then the last question was, if it was up to you and you alone to change the current law, would you do it? And all of us said yes. So I think that is an
Well, that was kind of a trick question.
It was. I want to share a brief sort of thing. Many years ago, when Martha and I were part of a fundamentalist church and starting to get interested in the Holy Spirit, there's a little bit of pushback. So the general environment was the Holy Spirit has gone away a long time ago. He's just not around doing anything. And so if you wanted to talk about him in that church, there'd be whether thinking or aren't thinking, there'd be pushback. Like, he's gone. That's called cessationism, I guess. He's just not around doing things anymore. And so I once asked a question in my Sunday school class, and I said, okay, if it was up to each of us in this class individually, and the Holy Spirit would be gone or he'd be here, and you get to choose. Forget what the Bible says. Just forget your interpretation. If it's up to you and you can say, you know, he's here, and there are gifts, and there's healings, and there's prophecy, and all kinds of wonderful things are happening, yes. Or, no, I don't want any of that. So to me, it's sort of an interesting threshold question to say, if it was up to you, would you change it or leave it alone? And most of us, falling for the trick question part of it, said, if it was up to me, I'd leave everything exactly the way it is. So.
No, they didn't.
Oh, we didn't? Did I get that
It
wrong?
was the other way around.
Yes.
No,
Would you change?
Should we change it?
Says if it was up to you and you alone to
it
change.
says yes is the bottom answer.
Oh, did I skip? I mean, I'm on number.
Oh, no. Number 8, the top answer is no, the bottom answer is yes.
Yes. So if it was
So 100% voted yes.
100% said you would authorize continuance of the DACA program. Is that what you meant?
No, it said we would authorize a path to citizenship.
Path to citizenship.
That's all it said. You would authorize a path to citizenship.
So we'll talk a little bit about what DACA is, but so what all of us are saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is for those people who are currently in the DACA program, they currently are here without the benefit of absolute statutory protection. So let me digress a little bit. Here's what DACA is, and start yelling and frowning at me if I'm spending too much time in the weeds talking about stuff you don't know. Current federal law defines who can be here legally and who can't. Everybody who's in the DACA program does not have the benefit of federal law saying they can be here. They are here in violation of current federal immigration laws. However, in 2012, President Obama said, in effect, I'll put some extra words in his mouth, I'm really frustrated with the Congress's failure to fix this problem, so I'm instructing the government not to enforce the law. So DACA is a forbearance. It is a uh, commitment on the part of the U.S. government that if you will come in, you illegal alien, if you meet the requirements for DACA, that is, you came here as a child, et cetera, et cetera, if you'll identify yourself and register, we will not kick you out for the next 2 years. And every 2 years you can come in and ask for another 2 years. So does that make sense? DACA is a state, it's prosecutorial discretion saying you're breaking the law, but we're not going to enforce the law.
Well, but it's specifically directed at people who did not bring themselves here.
That's correct. There's requirements. I think there's a list to, there's about at least 5 or 6 requirements. Basically, you had to come into the United States. At the time you came, you had to be under the age of 15, and you had to have lived continuously in the United States, I think, for 5 years. There are several requirements, and if you satisfy those requirements and register, you get 2 years to do whatever you're doing. Go to school, work, stuff. All right. Now, what has happened most recently is the federal government the Congress has failed to make any changes in current immigration laws that give any kind of path to citizenship or any kind of green card status or anything to illegal aliens, and that includes DACA folks. Furthermore, the administration issued a memorandum saying DACA's over and gave a 6-month deadline. 6 months from now, it's over. That means if you're here, we're going to throw you out. We're going to deport you. We're going to take legal action. No more just kind of waiting. Does that make sense? Everybody kind of, does that sort of make sense? Okay. Well, that was challenged once. And last week, the U.S. Supreme Court said we're not going to let the federal government change its mind today. So the DACA program is still in effect. That is, you're here illegally, but we're not going to do anything about it. That's the status today. So I'm making kind of a technical distinction between what the situation is and what the law is. Any questions?
Very well done.
Okay. So you can probably imagine, put yourself in the place of these 700 people. If you're making a case on their behalf, they're saying, oh, by the way, and in one of my articles that I sent you, and I think it's called DACA for Dummies, there's a little chart in there that says, you may be surprised to know, 50% of everybody in the DACA program was brought into the United States at age 7 or younger. So the people who meet those requirements, they were little kids. They weren't in control of their movements. They were brought here because of the way the DACA program operates. They were allowed to go to school, have friends, grow up, get jobs, go to college, join the military, and at present there are 27,000 DACA people who are in healthcare professions right now, fighting viruses and things. And they have for 3 or 4 years now lived in a perpetual state of wondering if they were going to be deported. And if you've seen the TV shows, these people are saying, we would be sent to a country where we don't speak the language, maybe. We don't have any friends. We don't know anybody. We're not familiar with that culture. It's no different than if one of us was sent to Mexico City and told you can't come back. Sort of a thing. So that's DACA.
Or Germany or Austria or England. Well, maybe not England, but Germany or Austria, where our ancestors.
Those English people don't speak English.
Okay. So Matt Reinecker sent me a video this afternoon from 2012 of Milton Friedman sort of talking about immigration from an economic standpoint. The subtitle of the video had a catchy title that is, in order to be successful, immigration needs to stay illegal. So and if you go to my newsletter thingy that I sent out, in the comments there, Matthew posted a link to that video. But the essence of Milton Friedman's position is people come to the United States because it's attractive to them. Whatever else is going on, their circumstance where they are compared to what their circumstances would be in the United States are negative. They're better off. Whatever's going to happen in the United States, it's better, even if I have legal status. And he says that has worked pretty well. That is, and from his view, just to say, a typical person in Mexico who crosses the border has made the decision that my life in the United States, sneaking, wandering, coming across the border, my life in the United States is worth it. It's worth it to me to take that risk and do that thing. Friedman says in his article or in his YouTube video that if you remove the disincentive and increase the incentives, then we'll have a situation that nobody in the United States currently would like. That's what he says. In other words, people are coming here to, I'll just say, freeload. So right now, people come here to work. See, because since they're illegal aliens, they don't get any benefits, so they come and work. And I'll kind of close out this part, and we'll turn it over to everybody else to kind of ask questions or say what you want to say. The United States has and I've in one of the articles I sent, which is called, I think it's something like when immigration became illegal or something like that. So there's a couple of things that I'd come into if you want to read it later, which is sort of a history of immigration laws in the United States. The United States has a long history of interesting immigration relationships with Mexico, maybe more so than any other country. Of course, we share a border.
Yeah.
But for example, during World War II, I think this is correct, during World War II, when a lot of American citizens were off fighting the war, it was really pretty handy to allow migrant workers from Mexico to come in and do work here for, to do the work that wasn't going to be done perhaps, and to do it for smaller wages than would otherwise have to be paid. So I would summarize this, I can't back this up, but I would summarize it that the history of immigration in the United States is when it seems to make sense and it's an advantage to us, us guys, then immigration is relaxed. When it starts to make us feel uncomfortable, then immigration is restricted. And some of the places you see this when you go back and look at the laws, some of the restrictions over the years have been very specific. So there was a time when, generally speaking, people in the United States didn't want any more Irish Catholics here. We got enough Irish Catholics, so stop it. Then there was a time when it says, we've got enough Italians here. We don't want any more Italians, so no Italians here. And then, which is probably one of the more restrictive ones, we've got enough Chinese people building the railroads and operating mines. We don't need any more Chinese people here, period.
That was like mid-1800s.
Yeah, Martha said in the mid-1800s. So it's interesting, this was all kind of eye-opening for me because I'm not much of a historian. But it's sort of interesting to kind of see that over the years, there's been very specific immigration prohibitions. And at the same time, comparatively speaking, our relationship with Mexico has been a lot looser because there's been an advantage to migrant workers coming. Now, migrant workers are not in the United States in the hope of becoming U.S. citizens. They are here because they want to work and have wages, more so than they'd have back home. So they come and they go. And I would suspect that that's to some degree still the case today. So I imagine each of us has had an experience being waited on, helped, or something by a person who doesn't speak English and is not here legally. Maybe. Okay, I can answer questions. Otherwise, what do you guys think? What do you think about DACA?
So one question I would like to ask, this is because Geno's absent, Jim, I have to ask the Geno question. Like, so you did a really excellent job putting all this, thinking all this stuff through. What got you so interested in the topic? And you can tell us now, or you can tell us at the end. But I'm interested,
Well,
and that's the Geno question he would ask.
that's the answer. Geno.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
He said, what do you feel what would you really want to talk with a bunch of people about? And I said, politics. And he said, Supreme Court decision. So I think Geno is going to, there were two big Supreme Court cases last week. And I think Geno was saving for himself the other one. So I got stuck with the leftovers. So yeah. And I'm glad in a way because I hadn't thought a whole lot about DACA. I mean, hard to sort of sympathetic to what I see on the TV, but just sort of rummaging through the history of it was interesting. For those who may remember, the U.S. Congress has tried several times to change current immigration laws in the last 20 or 30 years and failed every single time. The President George W. Bush made it a significant point of what I want to call it, goal, something he really wanted to change. So we had the President of the United States wanting to relax and fix immigration laws, and he could not get it done. So finally in 2012, like it or not, President Obama had Janet Napolitano, I think who was head of HHS, issue a memorandum. These sometimes are called executive orders, but this wasn't exactly an executive order. The president didn't sign it. The secretary of HHS sent a memo saying we're not going to enforce this law. Just like we'll go into that. Now, I'll just for kind of close the circle here, maybe. The Supreme Court did not kill the attempts to kill DACA. Does that make sense? The decision last week didn't say DACA is here to stay forever. What the Supreme Court said, and some legal scholars are sort of baffled by this, there is probably a reason behind it, but what they said is, the basis of the argument that the government made for abolishing DACA was it's illegal. So let's just get rid of it. It's illegal. It was not authorized by law, wasn't done the right way, so get rid of it. Kind of a way of saying that is the government did not follow the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act to create the policy. And they're kind of supposed to. Not just write a letter, you're supposed to go through the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act. The Supreme Court said, which is baffling to a lot of people, well, forget that. If you want to get rid of a policy that's been in place, you have to follow the Administrative Procedures Act, not just issue a letter. So we have a situation where President Obama had a letter issued, and President Trump had a letter issued, and the Supreme Court said, well, we're not going to talk about that first letter, but the second one, you just can't do that. Maybe I think maybe in part because they're saying, regardless of how this got started, there's an awful lot of people who've been relying on it for 8 years, and you just can't do away with something like that because you want to. You need to follow the procedures. So the door has been left wide open for the administration to start this up again, do it a little bit differently, and it appears to be the case that unless the laws change, DACA will get abolished if there's a president who wants it abolished. So, what else? What else do you think about that? So now I guess we kind of transition into the biblical stuff. Which is interesting to me. I don't mind getting off into the question of, so what should Christians do when they think the law is wrong? If you think the law is wrong, what should you do about it? Now, one example is many years ago, not long, I forget exactly when, I'll, back when, well, let me put it this way. A lot of people at Hope Chapel protested at abortion clinics and went to jail for it. This is 20 years ago, something like that. Some of the older people that are still around at Hope, some of those people spent a night in jail, accused of, and some other folks. So what? Hmm? Sorry, what?
I
Yeah.
think.
So you have people saying, we Christians saying, we think the current law is wrong and we're going to speak out and pay the price. So I'm curious, how attractive is DACA to you? Is it something that you think the law ought to be challenged on in person, putting yourself at risk? Would you hide a DACA person in your cellar?
Probably not.
I don't see anybody saying yes to that. Okay.
Well, I'm thinking, honestly, I haven't thought a lot about it or the intricacies of what the program is. And so I think that if I knew somebody and they were at imminent danger of being sent to a country that they don't feel, that they don't know, in a language that they don't speak, I would certainly consider helping them find a way to avoid being deported, I think. But I say that, and I don't know. I mean, that would be pretty disruptive to my life and my family.
Yeah. And
That literally could happen with the school population that my kids go to. So it's not too terribly distant for me to actually consider that. I haven't thought about it.
the I read an article a little while back that said currently, just pessimistic maybe, it said currently in the United States we have 2 1/4 branches of government. We have the presidency, we have the courts, and the legislature is doing about 1/4 of its job. uh, so what are
I'm
your
kind of glad if they were doing 4 times what they're doing. I'm a little worried about what would be done.
well, you have these you have this situation where you're saying by the way, one reason why this is an interesting topic is the significant majority of Americans support DACA. Most polls taken of all Americans show something like 70% approval, or yeah, we ought to have it, or it ought to be fixed. In other words, 70% of Americans do not want to deport these 700 people. Don't want to do that.
700,000.
700,000. Keep missing the zeros. However, what is also interesting, which is maybe something for us to introspect, I'm about to make an overstatement that I think may be true, but I can't prove it. The largest single demographic group
that oppose DACA
for one reason or another are white evangelicals. So what you have is the majority of Americans say, let's don't send those people away, but maybe a bigger percentage of white evangelicals are willing for that to happen than any other single demographic group. Is that surprising?
Are willing to send them away or willing to keep them here?
They agree with the administration that DACA should be rescinded and let the chips fall where they may.
Ah. Really?
Yeah. And in my little bibliography, I think there's one of those articles that sort of makes that point. So we have a situation whether you and I need to stop talking and listen here. So if you're just looking at how the world looks at the church, you know, I think the church is maybe evaluated unfairly a lot, and Christians and evangelicals are evaluated unfairly a lot. But the evaluation, when other people look at us, they're saying, we all want to see these, quote, young people have an opportunity to stay here, maintain their lives, and have some sort of way, if not to citizenship, at least to permanent, you know, green card status. They, you know, let them stay. That's what most Americans want. And when they look at our part of the church, they see people that say no.
Is there any chance that it's not, let me describe it like this. Perhaps most of white evangelicals are like, fine, these kids who grew up here, they came here when they were 3, let's let them stay. But for some reason, I have a feeling that's not what's going to happen. If we pass this through, it's going to turn into a boondoggle. It's going to be used for all sorts of things for which it was never intended. And we get sucked into that one. And there might be a bit of concern that this is a doorway to way beyond what's being sold. So they're telling us we're going to do this, but they're going to do something else entirely. And there might be a bit of suspicion there, I think, and I think perhaps deservedly so. When I think of both sides of this, one of the side I think of is, are they really going to do what they say they're going to do, or are they going to do what they've done in the past and blow way beyond the parameters of what they've said and do all sorts of other things? So there might be a factor there that you've got a bunch of people who are a little bit, I don't know, experienced in this sort of thing. They've observed it before.
Yeah.
That's what you get with the 14th Amendment. Was the 14th Amendment was established to grant citizenship to all the slaves that were freed. They had been born in America. They received American citizenship, and that was what the 14th Amendment was written for. Now, the author of that amendment would be horrified to see that now anybody who is pregnant and gets across our border, has a baby, they say, well, now this baby is a U.S. citizen. So it's exactly what Paul's saying. It's one thing for if we don't follow the intent of those who wrote the law and make it something way beyond the parameters of what was ever allowed. And I think that's a valid concern.
Yeah. Personally, I think it's interesting, you know, Paul, you know, if you were to say, maybe an unfair way to say this is, you have an evangelical and a Presbyterian talking about this, and they go opposite ways on it. And they both go to church every Sunday. Why, you know, so like, why would that, you know, what's kind of going on there?
Well, again, I think that they would agree entirely on the DACA side of it. I think both of them would agree, come on, cut the kid a break, essentially. They're not kids anymore, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's appropriate to cut them some slack, to not enforce the law in a way that does way more harm to everybody, us and them. So I actually think that the evangelical and the Presbyterian agree on that. It's the unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And Presbyterians, I have a close friend named Chris who is a serious Presbyterian. I wish he were here so I could just see him sigh. Those Presbyterians, they get fooled over and over again. They never learn.
Hey girls, this is time to fix up the floor.
What is?
I think what doesn't get, probably just doesn't get publicized in talking about, you know, the whatever general public perception, and even, you know, saying most Americans, it's still obviously it's not every single American who got polled. It's still some subset that we hope, we trust is representative, but we don't know. But what gets publicized is just the no, but not any, why don't we try this alternative instead? Here's a different solution. Here's a different way to go about it that is caring for the people who are among us as humans, but also establishing a law that we can live with. Like, why have laws that we're not going to enforce? That seems, I didn't realize that part about the reality of this situation, and it just, you know, obviously we have laws we don't enforce, but to do it officially and deliberately, why can't we change the law and come up with, but I guess it's because we can't come up with a law that people will agree on.
Here's one reason why we can't. Is that a question? No, that's not.
And I'll just note that Lynette said, just to remind everybody, that recording is on.
Yeah. Recording. Yes, Geno wants to see what everybody's position is.
Have I said anything horribly offensive so far?
We don't know for sure that it's you, Paul.
I'm sure.
So,
You know, just to the numbers. So I'm going to do some math here, and people who are better at it can correct me. So right now there are over 40 million foreign-born people in the United States. Most of whom are not, some of whom are naturalized citizens now. They have gone through the process to become U.S. citizens. 10.5 million of them are illegally here. So somewhere between 10 and 20 million people are here with green cards. I don't know, 15, 20 million people are here with green cards. Now we have the DACA people, which is less than 1 million, who cannot get a green card. So we're not even necessarily talking about a pathway to citizenship. We have 15 to 25 million people here who are not citizens and are allowed to stay here for the rest of their lives. We have 1 million people who are currently not on any kind of path to get a green card, citizenship, or anything else. They are here essentially because the government has said, tell us your name and you can stay here 2 years. And our federal legislature cannot figure out how to fix this. You may recall that I think the very last time this came up, a couple of years ago, was with our government shutdown. Anybody remember the longest shutdown in history? And what was on the table between the Democrats and the Republicans at that time was, the Democrats said, we will authorize money for a border wall if you will approve a DACA fix. And our legislators could not work that out. But I'm just saying that was on the table. You get something you want, I get something I want, and no deal. And that's been the case for 20 or 30 years. So Bree, I was kind of saying, you know, yeah, the place where it needs to be fixed is chock full of people who can't get enough of what they want to fix this smaller problem. To me, that's what boggles my mind. You know, 1/20th of the people who are here with green cards can't get them, and they didn't even choose to be here. And so, is anybody persuaded by the fairness theory? Like, it just wouldn't be fair to let these people jump in line ahead of everybody else?
Well, that was Barack Obama's opinion as a senator. There's a video of him as a senator, you can watch it on YouTube, where he spends half an hour arguing against DACA, saying how unfair it would be to the people who followed the law, how allowing people to disregard our laws degrades our society because people get used to ignoring what they don't want, the laws that they don't want. And so he makes quite a case about it and about how terrible DACA would be. And then as president, a few years later, he's the one who initiates the program while admitting that he doesn't have the power to do so. So he made a big flip-flop there, which
Yep.
we're in that mess now because of his choice.
I'm gonna just kind of put up.
So somewhere,
Go ahead.
go ahead. I was going to say, so you've just set 2 posts down. One is you're in DACA, so you can't get a green card no matter what. Okay. And you're in DACA, and now you get jumped to the head of the line. Is there anything between those two?
Oh,
There could be,
good question.
but it would require it requires the Congress to actually pass a law.
What about it as them jumping to the head of the line? I missed that.
Well, I think the original idea behind DACA was that these people who were in that category would be given immediate citizenship.
Oh,
So,
And
yeah.
I'm proposing if that were the hang-up point, that is, we don't want to give people an easy way to citizenship. Kind of, again, go back to the fact that we've got 15 to 25 million people here permanently without citizenship, and they can work and have jobs. They can pay taxes. They can work at jobs where their employer gives them health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. They can even join the military. Right now, if a DACA person has joined the Army or the military and served for 2 to 4 years and been honorably discharged, they will be sent to another country if DACA is rescinded. I mean, we have veterans who would be deported.
And in fact have been.
And have been, So it's kind of a mess. And I guess one of the questions, so I would, as we move towards, our discussion, we got about 30 minutes left. 2 things, if you want to focus on that, is, so what does the Bible say we ought to do? And second, if you think the Bible says something different than what current United States law is, what do you think you should do about it? What should you just personally do?
I think you should protest and tear things.
Here is, this is one of the things I sent out. I'll put it in the chat. This is 23 Bible verses welcoming immigrants. And in my newsletter, in my email I sent earlier, I gave you the federal definition of immigrant. And I would point out as you look through these scriptures, now again, the Old Testament and the New Testament don't necessarily jive with American law and American practice. I don't know if any of you kind of noticed that, but if you were to skim through the Bible or even do a word search and look at how many people had immigrant status in the Bible, famous people like Mary, Joseph, Jesus, all of the Israelites in Egypt, the whole nation. So there's lots of people who are in another country for some reason or another. And what does God kind of say about those kind of things, those people? Or what's our attitude? And how do we work around that? So I posted a link, I think, to a website that just has collected what they think are 23 scriptures that sort of talk about that.
Yeah.
These, I would guess quite a few of these are fairly familiar. It asks questions like, who's your neighbor? Are legal immigrants neighbors?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting because Bree's question kind of threw me for a loop. Um, I was thinking about neighbor love as being the guiding principle, and then I worked kind of top down through more conceptual ways of doing that about the nation state and rule of law and kind of low end labor market effects. But then I thought it was an interesting scenario. I mean, those are ways I think I would answer that political question as a way of serving my neighbor. But I thought it was very interesting when you talked, Bree, about if it was someone that you knew that God had put in close proximity to you personally, would you be willing to, if that person is then your neighbor, very, very vividly, would you take action that would put yourself at risk to help him or her or their family skirt the law, knowingly skirt the law? And that was that was an interesting question. I don't know I don't know what I could say about that. I mean, but to be honest, in terms of where I'd be at, but I thought that was I thought those were two different lenses where kind of added another aspect to it. So yeah, I mean, I would, for some like general policy reasons, I might make a very different, or might I make a very different decision possibly than someone God has put in close proximity to me and expanded my immediate circle of nearness or neighborliness. So that
Sounds
is.
like you're describing the sponsorship program, Joe, where a citizen of the United States can sponsor.
Yes.
So that is possible to do. You can. There's a lot of requirements to do it, and you have to inconvenience yourself with a lot of things to keep up with. But that is possible to do if you feel like somebody is going to a horrible situation, you could intervene for them. And they did that to save the people from the Nazis who were going to the prison camps. So you can do that legally right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is a very good point. Yeah, my grandparents sponsored someone from Eastern Germany in the early 70s to come over. Yeah.
But people in Germany weren't doing it legally. Protecting Jews.
It was behind the Iron Curtain. It was like in Soviet-controlled East Germany.
So you're saying Americans were sponsoring people?
Yeah. I'm sorry. My American grandparents sponsored. Yes. A otherwise non-qualifying East German family to come over. But that's a really good. I didn't consider that, Paul. I mean, I didn't consider. I just didn't think about that bill. That was.
I don't think I even knew about that.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Do I understand correctly, Bill, that you're saying that if 700,000 people stepped up and said they would sponsor each of these DACA recipients, that problem would go away?
Exactly.
That's interesting.
It'd be nice if we tried that.
I think there's a question, and I'm ignorant about this, but I think you're talking about those 700 people applying for visas through a part of the visa program involving sponsorship, right? Well,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
And that's a lot.
I don't know all the details of it, but it is a lot of paperwork and a whole lot of hassle to do.
Yeah.
You gotta really mean it and make a commitment, and it's not just a one deal and they give you a green stamp and there you go. It's multiple years of investment and time and keeping up with all the regulations.
Yeah. And I think Bill, I may be wrong, but I think that this also touches on the question of who gets to move to the front of the line, because if there are quotas. Maybe I shouldn't say that. The United States has limits on how many visas of what kinds it issues a year.
Like how many German?
So how many, and I don't know exactly all the details of that, but if you wanted to sponsor somebody, it's probably going to take a matter of years for them to get to the place where you can sponsor them, and that's one of the arguments. It's a valid position of there are people doing it the right way, and they get in line, and now you're talking about moving 700 people up into a special status, 700,000. It's either 700 million or 700. It's got a 7 in it.
Yeah.
I want to just pop up on the screen briefly these scriptures. Let me see if I can do that. And scroll.
Jim, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure, you can do that while this is up, I think.
What is the main difference between citizenship and someone that goes through that process and becomes a United States citizen versus having a green card? How's that experience different? What do they have access to that green card carriers don't have?
Well, they can vote.
Is that the main thing?
Well, it's all if a person has a green card, they're allowed to work in the United States. There is a possibility their green card could be revoked, and that's an easier process. In other words, a person with a green card commits a crime, a serious crime, they can be deported.
Deported.
Citizens can be put in prison, but there's no place to deport them to.
No, okay.
I think I'm about to share something here. Let's see if this works. Boom. Did that work? Okay. Can everybody see those scriptures?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if one stands out in your mind, but I will ask a general question. As you skim through these, do you think any of this is talking about immigrants in the United States today, or is this kind of like Old Testament stuff that doesn't really apply anymore? And you can talk while you're looking.
So it's principles. So like some of the things when, like when we've been in Geno's class about interpreting and teaching, looking for the underlying principle that was occurring within a culture, and then saying, what is that principle and how does it look in today's culture or in my different culture? So, looking at the principle, I think is key.
Would it be fair to say, at least in a lot of these Old Testament places, I mean, it's not like the nation of Israel or the people of God had a legislative type government where they could say, let's all get together and see if we can get a majority vote on what the rules should be. I guess it asks the question, why did God feel like he wanted to have these things set down in writing? What's he trying to tell his people? Does anybody have a problem with the idea that when there's a real need for people to come harvest my farm, it's okay, and when I don't need any people like that, then it's not okay?
I do.
I do too.
It's I grew up in Arizona and observed that a lot of illegals, and it was slave labor, man. They not only could they underpay them because they weren't citizens, but that they were afraid of being turned in. Okay. In fact, it was more fearful at that time. I thought it was an abuse thing. It's a form of modern day slavery to me. So that really deeply bothered me. It still does.
I worked with a fellow named Luciano who did that all the years that he grew up from the time he was 12. And he actually became a U.S. citizen eventually. But his whole family would get together with a bunch of people. They were getting group permits, and they would come. It was a harvester program that the government sponsored, where they would come and start where the harvest was, and then follow the harvest as things were coming through the southern part of the United States. As they came down, they started picking apples up in Washington State, and then as they came down, they were picking different things. And he would tell me about the community that I grew up in Panhandle of Texas. He said, "Oh, that place, I remember the cucumbers and the cabbages and all the," and it was like you said, a backbreaking hand labor, and they were getting paid a fraction of what you would have to pay an American to do that. So, and then they would, when the harvest was finished, they would take their money and go back home, and they considered it a great opportunity to get past the poverty that they were stuck with in their own country. And
that was the legal program, right?
Yes,
the migrant worker program. Yeah, yeah. That
I'm
familiar with that as well.
With a whole bunch of money, and they were the envy of the other people who were unwilling to work that hard from where they came from. But they came back. They were the, I guess, middle class of their little community.
And provided less expensive vegetables and fruits for Americans.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I think they call it a guest worker program now. So.
Yeah, they used to call it the migrant worker rotation or something like that. I remember, and it literally they had a whole schedule where they would go across the country. It was kind of amazing operation.
Yeah, Luciano loved to talk about it. He would tell you stories about different things that, as a kid, that he enjoyed about it, and it was a big adventure, from one end to travel across the United States and see all those things, and come back with bags of money. So he loved every minute of it, and he raised his kids as U.S. citizens, and he became a U.S. citizen later in life, and we worked together at Fox Service Company.
It seems like one question that comes up in considering these Bible verses is, what is the relationship between showing hospitality and creating a legal category for a person, and allowing some people to fit into that category and then excluding other people from that category? So our law has to do that, but then how does hospitality and care intersect with what our law has to do? I don't know the answer. Someone else.
Well, I do think that's an interesting question, because like a lot of the way I read a lot of those verses is that God constantly has to go back to his people and show us that he's expanding the kingdom that we're a part of and that we're called to serve. And rather than Israel turning inward, rather than the church being divided among people groups in Acts, God kind of constantly has to say, this is I have a worldwide global mission that's like unfolds even clearer and clearly until it reaches its apogee in Christ, and I think that's part of like, I do think like from a theological perspective, I kind of put legal or state questions and kingdom questions in two different spheres about the way God operates. And I think a lot of this stuff, the way he speaks is to expand the kingdom. And the way we do that is by self-sacrifice and service and love of neighbor. So, I mean, that's the way then I just kind of use that. I see that general principle of neighbor love as governing the wisdom or the laws of the land as well, too. But I think a lot of those verses are calling like, Israel initially and now the church about how we can expand the participation in his growing kingdom. And I think that's a very different question than the legal one, but it's a much more personally addressed, frankly, somewhat disturbing to me upon self-examination question about how small my own mental and emotional borders are for serving the people he's called me to serve. So that's, yeah.
So we're almost to 8 o'clock. Any, we can start start making closing comments if anybody wants to make them.
Well, it sounds like we got a program we're putting together. Oh, sorry. Sounds like we got a program we're putting together to sponsor DACA people. So I want to keep aware of how that one progresses.
You're in charge, Paul.
Oh gosh, you can't put me in charge. I can't even get my email done.
I remember.
And your wife is in charge.
If it weren't for
that would get done.
Yeah, then it would get done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it Joe? Was it you that gave me the link tonight? Otherwise, it wouldn't be here.
So yeah. I know. I was in the same boat, guy. I was like, yeah.
There was a news story about DACA, and the valedictorian of Crockett High School year before last was undocumented, and she actually was a wonderful student. She had gotten a full scholarship to University of Texas, and she just wanted people to know that people in her situation were making America better, and so they let her did a little story about her in the news, and she was saying, now I'm doing this, and my family knows I'm doing this, and I'm hoping that none of us get deported over this, because I'm shining the light on what we're doing. University of Texas was fine with it. Her high school was fine with it. But if the spirit of the law was followed, she wouldn't be in the same situation. She would have to get a sponsor or something else that's currently allowed under law if the law was followed.
I'm curious, how many of us are persuaded by the fact that it's the law and it's being broken, and that's wrong? And it doesn't matter what the consequences are. The law needs to be followed, or it needs to be changed.
Well, I have a thought about that, and that is that the more people we let into our society that are not intending to follow the law, the more we multiply lawlessness, because illegals live every day in violation of multiple laws, and they get used to that. And Austin's a sanctuary city, so there's not a lot of consequences for that. And so anyway, I've got lots of stories about that kind of thing that if we want to get into that sometime, I could talk about it. But I think that the more people we have that are outside the law, either because we're too lazy to enforce the law or because the law is unjust and everybody wants to ignore it, then the spirit of lawlessness is multiplied, and we pay for that. So that's one aspect of doing what we're doing, which is, we're just kicking the can down the road. We're not resolving anything. There's a lot of issues that need to be resolved, a lot of injustice that needs to be addressed. But instead of anybody having the courage to stand up and take a stand and say, let's do this or let's do that, we just put it off and put it off and put it off. And then before you know it, the kids are college age and the parents still haven't, helped them become US citizens. And then it's like, oh, it's everybody's problem now. So our government's unwillingness to deal with it and set a path and follow it has put us in this situation.
The one thing I would kind of disagree with is there have been sane voices who spoke up, who went on record and offered sane proposals and approaches and things like that. Nobody's doing what they're saying, but I do want to say that some people have spoken up. So they just, yeah.
Those people, Congress
Some of them.
people.
Yes.
Can't get enough consensus to build a momentum to follow through on something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because there's political, actually any kind of compromise is political fodder to attack anybody who supported it. So what we really need is a good compromise. We'll do this. This will be compassionate. Blah blah blah. This is a balanced approach, but then nobody's happy with it from an electoral point of view. So yeah, it becomes.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, when it's even-handed, it's either side can be attacked with it. So,
Luann, did you want to say something?
And it's just kind of following him saying that. It just if we could take the politics out of these important decisions, which is of course impossible, but it becomes so many things get just stuck in the mud because of the polarization, and which I just feel like it's getting so much worse in the country right now. And so many things seem to just become something to fight about and something to make a stand on, rather than everybody trying for once to be unified and do the best thing, whether they get reelected or not. If that wasn't an issue, if pleasing constituents wasn't an issue, but rather doing the right thing. I don't know.
Kind of moving towards closing. Well, I'll pause it in a minute or two for anybody else want to make a last comment. There was a second part of this, which was called DAPA, D-A-P-A. The P stands for parents. So at the same time as DACA, there was DAPA, and DAPA was struck down. It has never really been enforced. Because, in effect, people, whether it's court judges or anybody else, kind of thought, no, we're not going to cut any slack for the parents. But we are going to recognize something we have for 8 years, children. So we have a situation in which if a person enters the United States illegally with their 1-year-old child and has a baby while they're here, they now have 2 children, one of which is an American citizen and one of which is a DACA. And who do we send with? So essentially, if you want to keep the family together, an American citizen has to voluntarily agree to leave the country. I guess I would
Oh,
a couple of thoughts. One is there any of us who has never received any amnesty of any kind whatsoever in any situation? Anybody,
Trick question. Trick question.
yeah, yeah.
anybody ever been let off the hook for doing something wrong?
That sounds a lot like forgiveness.
Yeah.
And secondly,
Wait, that's not what we're here to talk about. That's
is there really a problem with carving out and saying, there's lots of reasons why we ought not to do this, but we are talking about 700,000 out of 330 million people. If you do the math real quick, that's not a very big percentage. It's not like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, we've got a problem. It's a bad problem. We shouldn't have let it happen. But why don't we just carve out these 700,000 and let them have green cards and then fix things? That's that's an option. So, and then the second thing I'd mention is, you know, you can write your congressperson, say, this is what I think. We have a situation right now in which approximately 75% of Americans favor a policy that our legislature will not enact. Wonder why. So, any last comments? Anything anybody else would like to say?
Jim for president.
Ah, you know, Joe, I kind of hate to do this. Did you know that you have a stunt double?
no. I have a stunt double.
Wait, is this the stunt double?
I'm trying to see here.
No.
Let me see if. Okay, I'm going to show you everybody. Joe, you okay? Are you feeling like I can make fun of you a teeny bit?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to show you a picture of Joe Hootman's stunt double. Let me see. Let me get share my screen, and that'll be our last fun thing for the night.
Can I have him take my place for certain things like work?
What do you
Oh
think?
my goodness.
Can y'all see that okay?
Yeah. Who is it?
Joe, would you let that guy stand in?
Any day, any day, any day. He's way smarter and saner than I am. Yes.
You know who he is?
Yeah. He's David French. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, the commentator.
Yes. Yeah.
I think of you, Joe, and that's good. I mean, I rank you both up there as people who are thoughtful and say good things. So, all right.
I'll hit him up and see if he can take a couple days next week on work. That'd be great.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and send comments if you want, or if you can, we can continue. As they say on the news hour, we can continue this offline.
Well done,
Thanks,
Jim.
Jim.
Well done, Jim. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Now, Jim, do you want us to tell Geno how great this is?
Oh,
Or do you want us to tell him it was terrible so we'll never ask you to do it again?
well, one of my
The
goals
recording's still on, guys.
was just to look good. Okay. All right. I'm stopping the recording and.